Hello, my friends. Welcome to Word Made Digital. I'm your host, Joanna LaFleur, and you're watching the YouTube version of the podcast. Week after week, we're coming at you with conversations with creatives and communicators all about how to communicate the best news in the world, but in the digital age. Thanks so much for watching, checking out this episode. If you want to know more, you want to check out more of our free resources, go to wordmadedigital.com or browse around this YouTube channel and you're definitely going to find some content that will help you. And of course, thank you so much to our sponsors. Compassion Canada and Wycliffe College are making this podcast possible. Enjoy the interview. Mike Carmody, welcome to Word Made Digital. I'm really glad to have you here on the podcast today.
Yeah, it's exciting to be here. I appreciate the opportunity. This will be good.
And okay, before we go too far, maybe you can explain, give us a bit of your context. Like, what is your job? And then I want to know how you ended up here. Like, what has sort of been the career trajectory for you in tech and digital?
Yeah, so it's a good question. So the job as it is right now is called Executive Director of Marketing and Digital Growth, which sounds great. Basically, we made the decision to try to bring together technology and IT, our data group, our data insights, and data science, if you will. I use that very loosely, and our marketing team, brand, content, all together to try to solve for how do we deliver great experience and tell our story really well to Canadians. That's the short version. It's new. We just made this move. Prior to that, I was running the IT and the data piece and a little bit of the digital side. And so, for us at Compassion Canada, we've been kind of laser focused in this season of how do we deliver great experience to drive our ministry. And so out of that came this decision to bring these two groups together. And it was a natural for me. It felt natural, at least. I've been in the digital space, whatever that means. That changes, of course, almost daily now, what that means. But I've been doing that for about 20 years now, hard to believe, and seen it kind of evolve continually and exponentially evolve what we even mean by digital. Before it was just, a website was an electronic brochure and we felt good about that. And now you have this engaging tool set that you can amplify your messaging with. So that's the space I've been in for, again, the last 20 years or so. And so it was a natural progression when I came to Compassion and started talking with Allison about some of these changes.
That's a great question. Maybe before we go too far, we should define that a little more because you're right. The word digital is a broad term. And we use it on this podcast to reference lots of different things because it's talking about Word Made Digital. And so in your world, when you say digital, what does that even mean?
It's such a good question. And the beauty of it is, we all have, I think, certain different definition and a different way of approaching it. For me, what it's become to mean is, we have technology and we've always tried to align technology and digital as the same thing. But I think technology is the tool set. It's those decisions and things we decide to use, whether it's a type of website, whether it's a piece of software, where digital is how we use them. And more specifically, I think what it's evolving into is how we use those different technologies to engage with either our supporters, our customers. We don't always love that word in charity space, but you know what I mean. Whether we use it to engage with each other internally or our beneficiaries. So to me, digital is really this beautiful, big opportunity to use tech in a way that drives, your ultimate mission and vision of your organization.
Well,
That's all.
And that's all, just that big, giant
just
thing.
That.
But as you say, technology is changing all the time. And one of the challenges I think a lot of people encounter in the charity space, the church space, the Christian non-for-profit work is that technology is changing rapidly. And how do we keep our skill set up with it? So what do you guys do for that? I mean, just maybe for yourself, how are you trying to stay current? But also, for your team, is that where you hire in consultants, or are you going to you're taking courses or you're reading a lot
Yeah.
of nerdy books.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's any and all of those things. You're right. It changes at such a rapid pace, and again, I think that change is exponential. Certainly in the last 4 or 5 years, definitely in the last 8 months. So I think especially in the charitable space, I think we have to give ourselves a little bit of freedom and be okay with the fact that we're not always going to be like leading bleeding edge within your team. It's almost impossible now to be that way. So yeah, you have to be okay with learning. So we use lots of language like innovation, agile, being a bit bold and risky, being okay with failure. All those things sound great in a document or on an article, but to put them in practice is a whole nother thing. So we start there, or at least I start there, with giving ourselves the freedom to say, okay, we may not understand everything 100%, but the beauty of digital is that you can test these things relatively quickly. So you can figure out what you don't know relatively quickly without massively impacting your brand or from a cost perspective. It's not like it was 15 years ago. Even if you printed a brochure or a new catalog and sent it out, that's it, you're done. So if it doesn't work, that money's gone, and it's a long tail journey to figure out whether it worked or not. We're in this digital space and all these new digital tools, you can play around and test. And so for us, we give ourselves some freedom to do that. At the same time, yeah, offset with being okay with bringing in consultants and agencies who can help us with that. Even those agencies who aren't necessarily charity based. And I think that's something new for us in the charitable space, not for profit space. We've always felt like, well, if you don't know charity, I probably can't engage with you. You won't know our business. But I think digital cuts across a lot of that. And as long as you know who you are and you know your business, you can engage with lots of different experts out in the field. So it's that, and yeah, be in a constant learning posture.
Well, and even as you say, I mean, at its most basic level, we're not talking about something even, highly technical. If you don't know how to use Instagram or you're inexperienced with making Instagram posts, it's a
Yeah,
simple test, A/B test. It's a simple, like, well, I'm going to post
yeah,
something and see if people respond to it. It's as basic. The data can be quite complex or it can be quite simple. Like, did anyone like this? Did anyone comment on the picture? Did anybody care? And then I posted another picture and people really did engage with that. And so, even for someone who doesn't have a huge amount of tech resource in their team, even at the most, kind of basic levels, you can learn. It is, as you say, the cost of entry is low, so you can kind of learn as you go and take some risks. Are you a risk friendly person by nature? Do you like that
yeah,
part of the game?
yeah. Absolutely, because I think it's the only way that you find out just how far you can go and pursue deeper engagement with people and drive things forward. I think you have to take risks. I think there's more than enough examples of organizations who haven't taken those risks they could have and now find themselves highly irrelevant. Um,
Hmm.
And I
Wow.
think too, as you were talking, it's not only just that it's so easy to enter some of these new channels, if you will, digital channels. I think the other thing that we've talked a lot about is expanding, what success looks like as well. It's no longer just the conversion or the acquisition, which is very traditional in the charitable space. Brand awareness is a real thing, and to be
Mm.
okay with
Yeah.
realizing you got to get in front of more people, and the only way to do that is go find them. And the only way to do that is to test some of these things out and see if those folks are there and if your message is sticky. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. And so, as we talk about this, we're kind of dancing around the reality of the pandemic and how it's changed so
yeah.
much. But in your team, or maybe broader in the charity space, how has stuff changed this year, in
Yeah.
2020? What has shifted in the charity world? I mean, as you know it, anyways, from your perspective.
Yeah, I think the key thing is I don't want to underplay in any way or shape or form the impact obviously COVID has had on people domestically and globally. But I think what it's done in our space is just accelerated what we knew was coming. We had the luxury of finding your own timing to get into the digital space and to accelerate all your digital engagement pieces. Um, I mean, at a cost, of course, as others went faster than you. March hit, and then within 2 weeks, the world changed, and all of a sudden, you didn't have the luxury of waiting anymore. You were there, and so you had to just react and figure it out. And as a point of pride, I think the way our team responded to that, with a sense of, okay, let's hunker down and figure this out. Whether it was supporting staff figuring out how to work from home who were used to working in a building, to engaging with people. And the biggest challenge I think that's hit all of us is just how noisy and crowded the digital space got in the course of like 2 months. Everybody was trying to tell their story, an ever-changing story of their work from a charity perspective, as well as in the for-profit space. So that's been, I think, the biggest challenge is how do you figure out the right way to have your voice heard in an effective way, and not in kind of a cheapened, salesy way, if I can use that. No offense to anybody who's in sales, but you don't want to come across as just trying to sell something. You want to tell good stories. And so I think that's been probably the biggest change, is just how fast we've had to evolve getting in those spaces and telling that story differently.
Yeah, it's true. I think about the challenges of, in the beginning, if you pivoted to do an online event, for example, from an in-person event, I think that in my own world, I've seen traction with that. And then as the summer waned on of 2020, and, sometimes summer's just harder anyways, but what I've been hearing from organizations I've worked with is there wasn't as much traction. People were getting exhausted and didn't want any more.
So true.
And did you find that? I mean, it sounds like you've had to make pivot and then a pivot and maybe another pivot, if that's the word of the year.
Totally. And it's and there's I think there's fatigue in the marketplace, because we're all trying these new things and hitting the same 30 million people in Canada with all these incredible opportunities, but you can only process so many in your head before your head explodes. But also internally, like, the innovation's hard, right? And to be innovative, even, in a small way within the context of who you are, it's tiring, especially if you're not used to it. And so I think that fatigue combined with the external fatigue, we hit June, July, and people are like, oh, when is this going to be done? But coming out of the summer, as in the last, certainly for us, in the last month or two, there's now this new energized feeling that, okay, this isn't the new normal, obviously, and we can kind of get excited again about trying some different things. But again, I think it's recognizing and realizing you're face to face. Like, if you're used to in-person events, there's a response rate that you're used to getting in face to face that just doesn't exist digitally, like not even close. And that alone, helping organizations understand that you just have to be okay with the fact that those response rates are going to drop digitally. Doesn't mean they're zero, but you have to just recognize that, and then pivot and get used to, it's the sales cycle. Again, we don't like that word, but the sales cycle is longer in the digital space. You're going to go on a longer journey with people before you get that moment of transition to where they partner with you, and that you got to be okay with that and find ways to keep that story going.
That's really interesting, because you talked about earlier the idea of the long tail of a print piece. Maybe you send out, I think with Compassion, like the gift catalog. That's this beautiful printed magazine. There's a digital version as well, but this printed magazine that's delivered to my house. My parents get it. Lots of people get this magazine. It's for years we've had this come to our door. And you talk about a long tail there, but you're talking about long as well, but different on digital. Like, what are you seeing as some of the nuance of difference, like, or maybe how you need to talk to someone digitally versus in print? What are some of the I'm thinking of people who are listening who are trying to figure this out too, and they're from small organizations who don't have the resources that you have.
Absolutely.
What are some things that just to help them as they're listening?
So I'll get there in a roundabout way. I think with print pieces, again, it's long tail, but you do all the work at the beginning and then out it goes. So you have to put everything in there, and you hope that some of it sticks to the point where you really, somebody gets connected to it in absence of you. like, because they're there looking at something and you're not there. And so digital is also a long tail relationship, but you have the opportunity to engage. So it's this idea of personalization. So what do you know about the people you're interacting with? And there's a whole body of work around that can get very expensive and huge as far as data mining and data science and all these neat words we like to throw around. But in the end, it's, do you know the people you're talking to? And if you can know one more thing about them, that can change the way in which you interact with them and you have a conversation with them and engage with them. And that is available to all of us. It's simply finding the right ways to ask. And again, the beauty with digital is that we can test those things relatively easy and pivot quickly. So if you have a database of 1,000 people, start with 10 of them and try some emails out and see what kind of response you get and track it. And then if that works, like you talked about A/B testing on social posts, it's the same thing with emails. Try a couple of different approaches with a smaller subset and see what works. And if something works and it seems sticky, great, expand that out and then follow that through. But I think it is long tail, but we have such a wonderful opportunity within the digital space to really get to know the people, which sounds counterintuitive. You think digital, I'm disconnected, I'm not face to face, but with so many different ways of engaging through social, email, through your two-way websites and all those different types of opportunities and tools, you really can get personal with people. You really can. It takes a little bit of work, but it gives you that opportunity.
You just said something that's a new expression to me, a two-way website.
Right.
Tell us what that is and why we might want one.
Yeah, I probably made that up, but basically, I think websites either are I coined it. It's copyrighted here
No,
today.
it's good. Yeah, trademark.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's finding ways to your website to drive a two-way engagement and a two-way conversation. So as opposed to, again, just a blanket, here's who we are, I hope you click something, or I hope you make the choice. Things we talk a lot about voice of the customer and customer data and customer feedback loops. You can use your site to provide those. It may not be, Joanne said, but giving interactive content on your site and clear ways that they can add their own voice if they share it or interact with your site allows us to again learn something a little bit more new. So to think about your web properties in a way that's not just so static. It's really hard to gauge over time whether they're effective or not, to use them in a way that you can create some kind of two-way interaction with your supporter base.
I like what you said about not static. I think one of the big learnings I had in many years of working in church ministry was just working in a local church. I still do church ministry, but in a different way now. And just how often a website needs to be changed, tweaked, evolved. As you say, new pages, special highlight features, interactive stuff. Viewing it not like set it and forget it, but really a living. Maybe there are some pages. I mean, if the About Me section is probably not going to change every month, but your vision and mission statement are probably the same, but there's a lot of pages that need to have life to them, and they need movement or kind of constant. Maybe it's the metaphor of a garden, pruning and garden and weeding and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and connecting that digital element or property or engagement tool, your website, with your social media. With, if you're doing ads, like making sure that they align really well together. That's the heart of experience design. And I think that's such an important piece. And again, it's becoming easier and easier to do. You have to do a bit of research to find the right technology and the right platform and all the rest of it. But it's not that hard to have your Instagram feed sitting, rotating over here on the left-hand side column of your page, which then connects back when we talk about brand awareness, but we rarely talk about brand recall. And that's a big piece of awareness, is that, I tell you once who I am, I need to tell you again, probably 4 or 5 times before we really get into a relationship and engage. So connecting all those pieces, again, is becoming easier and easier now, and such a significant part of developing that connection. To me, it's probably the most exciting piece about digital now, is that you can bring those things together. And again, test, 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 because it can change. It's not that hard to change. The more you're changing your site, the better response Google is going to have to you. So if you want to rank a little higher when it comes to search engine optimization, you need static pages don't rank. Like they get dropped and they drop down and down and down and down in the results. So that's the other element to it as well.
I mean, that was just a little nugget right there that people can take
Yeah.
and apply immediately. Static pages don't rank on Google. They don't show up high on the page. You want the pages that are changing regularly are the ones that Google loves to send people to.
Yeah, and your domain in and of itself, like it'll look at and say, okay, yeah, World Made Digital is a active domain, so we'll rank them a little higher in certain content pieces.
Oh, that's really interesting. I mean, there's so much to learn about SEO. Maybe, I don't know if this is your area of expertise. Maybe this is where you pull in, that's where you pull in the consultancy and all that kind of stuff. But as you continue to talk, you've had this interesting merge recently, which is one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the podcast. There's so much to talk about in the charity space around digital because 2020 has changed reality for so many of us and the work that we do, and then how we interact with clients, customers, congregation members, whichever we're talking to. But you have done they've made an interesting choice of compassion of merging a marketing department and then a digital department, and you have this new thing called marketing and digital growth that you're overseeing. I mean, digital could probably fall in a few different categories. You could merge digital with you could marry it to a few other departments.
Yeah.
But why was it connected to marketing? Like, why has this merge happened? Basically, as much as you can speak of it, I'm curious about the strategy here of
Yeah.
why this decision was made.
Yeah, I think it's a few things. We have a multi-year strategy, and one of the goals we have is to adopt a learning and innovative mindset, which is the way we talk about digital transformation. So we've chosen not to just say we want to digitally transform, because that's incredibly buzzy and can mean a million different things. But we want to kind of anchor that to this idea of fostering internally a learning and innovative mindset. So because of that, we look at the way, what we do is basically try to engage Canadians in our work, of course. And all of that growth is going to happen through down digital channels. So the way we tell our story, the way we express our brand, the way we engage with people directly, as opposed to face and in church settings, which is massively important and will augment that work. But we recognize if we're really going to become more digitally mature in our organization, what we need to do is make sure that the growth comes from the digital piece and directly tied to who we are, the content we put out, the message we put out, and the way in which we express our mission and vision. And so it made, to us at least, it made a lot of sense to combine those two things. As we center ourselves on being a more we use neighbor instead of customer, a neighbor-centric organization. We know that digital and marketing have to be dovetailed together. They can't be two separate units that are, siloed, but you can put all the process you want in place. But we want them to be, fully dovetailed together, so that as we look towards continuing to engage with people with our message, that digital is top of mind. And that's hard. I think that's hard for organizations, certainly larger ones, because we've elevated digital to a point now where I think there's sometimes a fear to say, well, hold on, is that team going to now do everything? Are they, quote unquote, more important?
Right.
And it's not the point at all. Rather, that we want to position them well to support and enable everything else in the organization.
Well, and I think anyone who's familiar with compassion as a brand would think of compassion as an organization that does live in-person events really well. That, I can think of a time where in Toronto, I was in like our largest sports stadium, and there was a Hillsong concert and Compassion was there. Beautiful, meaningful videos were shown. The Hillsong guys talked about their experience locally, like on the ground with Compassion, seeing the work, and then invited others to engage. And I would imagine it was, there must have been uh, 20,000 people. I don't know. I'm terrible at numbers. There were, at least 10,000 people at this event. There were lots of people there. And therefore, I would assume you have again, if we talk data, there would be a sense of if this many people are in the room, this is what we can expect as a result
Yep.
in terms of child sponsorship. And that's gone. Like that whole revenue thing currently anyways, it's thrown out the window. And so now, in the same way I'm thinking of people listening, who their primary way of getting donations was on a Sunday morning passing a plate in church, or and maybe they had online, but it wasn't the emphasis. The same for Compassion.
That's
you
right.
had online, it
Yep.
just wasn't the leading edge.
Right.
So it makes sense as you're saying, this digital and marketing, that they go together. That was the pivot you need to make. But I'm thinking too about just how to apply this to other organizations. What are you seeing working out there? Maybe even outside of a charity space. Is there anything that you're looking to that you're sort of like, oh, that's something we can learn from? Are there any organizations that you admire or are excited about, or just something that we can look to as a case study that we should check out?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to find good charitable examples, not because they don't exist, I just don't know them. But it is more for me, the examples to look are like somebody like a Spotify. Now we don't create software, so it seems a bit of a strange example. But if you look at the storyline of Spotify and how they've created their internal environment and have constantly been in change, and they're okay with change, in order to tell a better story, to get their product out quicker, faster, and to really engage with the user. Like we all, in the last week, if you have Spotify, you got your 2020 Wrapped. And now, Instagram and Twitter are exploding with everybody sharing, here's what I listened to. Like, that's all a result of them internally saying, how do we better work together and test and try some different things to engage our user base deeper? To me, they're one of the greatest examples you can look to. Mostly because they put their themselves out there and say, here's how we're organized. And then 2 months later go, yep, that didn't work. So that's okay. We're going to change and try something different. They embrace it. They really do. And I think it's incredible. So I think it's, again, in order to succeed in this digital space right now, certainly right now, and in the future, we'll be willing to be bold and risky. You asked earlier, am I a risk taker? Am I risk adverse? I'm very much a risk taker. That doesn't mean reckless. There's a difference, but you have to be bold and take some risks. And digital just gives you a safe place to do that because you can pivot relatively quickly. So, the Spotifys of the world, Southwest, I think, is a really good example if you look them up.
What's going on with Southwest? You mean in terms of like just with pandemic and nobody flying? Have they done something interesting?
No, I just mean that from an innovation perspective, the way they kind of organize themselves, empower their staff over time.
Right.
They're a really, really neat example of that. Some of the hotel chains, I think, have done some really interesting things. Hilton's done some really neat things during the pandemic in the way they're telling their story. Even Sobeys, like here in Canada, if you take a step back and look at the storyline of Sobeys during the pandemic, the way they talked about
grocery store, if people don't know it. Sobeys a grocery store.
Yeah. Again, they've tried some different ways to tell their story to encourage people to engage. For them, come in the store and buy food, but to share this sense of safety and a sense of concern. All of those things, I think, are just excellent examples to using the digital space to tell a different story, even though you're the same people, you're the same organization. I think that's the greatest examples that we can look to right now.
Oh, that's interesting when you mentioned Sobeys and you're talking about this grocery store chain and they're expressing a sense of concern. Can you speak to that a little bit in terms of the charitable space and compassion, where there's this delicate situation where the economy has changed. So you're inviting people to participate in huge needs around the world. I would love you to share a little bit more about what's going on. But doing that in light of, people have lost jobs. People are stressed and anxious, or maybe they haven't lost their job, but they've had reduced income in some ways, or they're feeling vulnerable to losing their job in the future because of the change.
Yeah.
How do you do that dance?
Yeah. It's hard. It's hard. And I think it's, the best thing that we can do, I mean, always, but right now, the best thing we can do is just be honest and recognize and say it right out of the gate. We get it. We're all suffering through this. This is probably the first time in history where the impact domestically and an impact globally is, while not at the same scale, there is an impact. And what's affecting me is affecting people around the world. Um, and I think what's really important is for us to recognize it. And in your storytelling and in your communications, just recognizing that people are there, while still helping to illustrate wherever you serve, here's the need. Um, I think it's going to be significant. And for those of us who are working, in international development, um, helping people understand that this has really pushed back a whole bunch of success that we've had over the last 20 years. It's pushed back global poverty levels, going backwards instead of forwards where we've been going. And at the same time, in telling that story, I think we have to remind people there is hope, that we will get through this. We really will. Over the course of mankind's history, we see that we've responded in real effective ways. And it's hard and it's difficult, but we will get through it. I think hope is a big piece to any of our storytelling. Meeting people where they're at and allowing them and listening and engaging in real good conversation. I think for us to hear people say, I'd love to support, sponsor another child or give to that disaster relief cause, but I'm just, I just lost my job, or, I don't know if I'm going to get to go back to work. I think sitting and just recognizing that and hearing it is so important, right. Just in general to support people, but also to show that, that you care.
So, I mean, then before, just because we're already kind of circling the topic, tell us a little bit what is going on. Here we are, it's December 2020, whenever people are listening to this. This has been a crazy year for all of us, but it's also been, magnified around the world in terms of people who are poor, people who don't have as much economic resource, or a safety net, are now even in kind of a worse situation. So tell us a little bit about what's going on, because I don't think that people know what's really going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's heartbreaking to see the impact that it's had and continues to have. Some of the developing world has been a bit slower, like they're a couple months behind usually from where we're at with COVID. So we're in our second wave now. I think we officially say that. That'll hit the developing world probably in a couple of months, likely. Even though this virus is changing often and there's no guarantees. But you've seen global poverty levels go back. And it's, for me, the thing that's both heartbreaking, but also an opportunity for organizations like ourselves and many others to come alongside is, kids in homes where maybe dad, had just got some training and was just starting to make some income. And there was a sense of hope in that child's life. And now dad's lost the job or mom's lost the job. And they're back to where they felt they were before. So I think this sense of anything we can do to bring a sense of hope in their lives and come alongside them, not only with the tangible needs, which are certainly there. Food insecurity is a real thing now, and the lack thereof. Hygiene, medical care, all those things now are amplified once again. And we need to come alongside and do that. And Compassion's been, through the support of donors around the world, and certainly in Canada, over 7 million food packs have been distributed through Compassion so far. Over 4.5 million hygiene kits. We've assisted more than 438,000 individuals with medical care. All of these things have met them in their need, but at the same time, what you don't want to lose sight of is coming alongside them emotionally which is what we love about our program, is finding ways to do that. Again, it's hard now because where, churches that we partnered with could bring kids in and sit with them, now they can't. And so, you talk about digital, there's also this digital transformation required in even how we deliver program. But then the need is real, the need is significant. And add into that all these natural disasters in South America that have the devastated regions. It just amplifies the need in a real
And
significant way.
political,
Yeah, yeah,
insecurity. Yeah. I
yeah,
mean, we've talked on this podcast, before about what's going on in South America and huge migration of people across borders
yeah,
because of political unrest, and now pandemic. On top of that,
yeah,
um, it's sort of a pile on, um,
totally.
of
Yeah.
multiple issues all at once. Do you feel overwhelmed by it at times? I mean, for us, then, as people who are hearing these stories, I mean, you live in them
Yeah.
every day. Your job is to tell us about these stories. Um, but how do you carry those? I guess I'm trying to be a bit more
Mm,
personal about it, Mike. It's a
yeah.
huge thing that you're part of. It can be
Yeah.
overwhelming.
It can. And what carries me through is the stories of hope that we do get to see. And I have an inside track on those, and we're trying to share more of those externally as well. But where you hear about a pastor whose church is closed, who's not allowed to meet and greet with people, but figures out WhatsApp in order to engage with at least one more. You hear him say, "If I can engage with at least one more kid and just come alongside him." Like when you hear about people who are like in the middle of it, on the ground, desperate for any way to give hope to these kids, like that gives me hope. That charges me up. I mean, if I'm not sitting in the middle of it, I don't sit in poverty. I just don't. I'm well established. I have a home. Um, so if I can hear somebody like that who's giving everything to be able to meet these kids where they're at, that is what carries me through. Um, and we're starting to get more and more of those. It took a while to get some of those stories just because communication was cut, because everything stopped, right? Nobody could go anywhere. But as those start to come out, I think it's important for us to recognize. I think you can focus on the doom of it too much, and that does get you down. But hearing some stories of hope and of people kind of doing extraordinary things for their fellow man is what really kind of charges me up and keeps me hopeful.
And a question that I hadn't thought to ask, but as I'm hearing, you're talking about how, a pastor locally might be using WhatsApp or whatever. What's I mean, it's a general question, but is there challenges because there isn't enough digital access at like in a developing area, or do you find that they all got cell phones and everybody's communicating? I think of people getting cell phones before they were working to get phone lines in, landlines in to all these remote places, and then the cell phone towers ended up speeding that up.
Yeah.
So are you finding that people they may not have much, but they have access to a phone or something to communicate digitally, or are they digital natives as well, like around the world like we are?
Yeah, it depends on the region, of course, certainly, and the
Yeah, of
context.
course.
But the technology is more available, I think, than we think sometimes, and it's finding ways to leverage it. It's not that unsimilar to what we spent the first half of our conversation um, about using digital and using technology in a way to meet the needs that are there. So, there's real needs of, welfare checkups to making sure kids are okay and families okay, providing counseling, tutoring, encouragement, and all those things. So you see staff and church partners with compassion really trying to explore, how do we use cell phones? Yeah. How do we use WhatsApp, social media, texting, radio, all of those, exploring those. That's digital transformation at its most beautiful core, where these guys who aren't necessarily executive directors of digital growth, but are just there in the field going, okay, I got this thing in front of me, my phone. How can I use this? And you know what they're doing? They're testing and they're trying. and they're finding out ways that they can use the technology to do a little bit more each day. And again, I think it's such a beautiful thing to see. And again, it gives me hope when I hear about things like that. It allows me to say, okay, the work we're doing is that important. If I can empower that guy to try something else tomorrow, and he can make 2 more calls or 3 more calls and connect with 2 or 3 more kids to give them some hope, that's worth any challenge I may have today in figuring out social media challenges or content strategies, or the things that we somehow seem are so difficult.
Okay, so maybe as a closing question, and if you, I hope you'll be direct and maybe even blunt about it. When you think of the charity playbook, and you think of a lot of organizations are a bit more than a bit outdated, stuck in the past.
Yeah.
But what needs to be thrown out of the playbook? If I can use the metaphor of a playbook, what needs to be thrown out? What's outdated thinking? We got to stop doing it, cut our losses, and move on. What's
Yeah.
dead?
In the most general term, anything you've written in pen. And what I mean by that is we've gone into in the charitable space, especially, we are behind the times. And I say this all the time, and it gets me in trouble, but we're slower to adoption in this digital space. And we assume that we can create something, create a plan, create a playbook, write it in pen, laminate it, stick it in a binder, paint it on the wall, and that's our plan for the next 8 months. And we're so stubborn sometimes to be unwilling to be more iterative, to be more agile. That needs to go. Like, that mindset just needs to be eradicated as quickly as possible, so that we're testing the most relevant opportunities to engage with people, because the causes in the charitable space, the reasons why we exist, are that important for us to hold tightly to long-term plans. Needs to change immediately. And the sooner we do that, the sooner we can drive newer ways of engaging and really see, I think, much better results. So that, and our risk register has to drastically change. We are so risk adverse, and I get it, because if I spend $100 over here, that takes it from the field. I understand that, but I can tell you from my perspective, I support organizations so that they're relevant in 5 and 10 years from now, not today, not just today. And so we have to be willing to take some risks in order to be more relevant and more effective. I think those are the 2 biggest things, that if they don't change, we're going to get passed by so fast. Yeah, and I worry about our space if we don't get there, to be honest with you.
Yeah. I think of, that the challenge of the generational challenge, of the seniors who are these faithful givers who have probably letter writing was the way to get money, maybe ads on TV. People don't even have TV anymore. People don't write checks in the younger generations. People aren't writing checks. It's credit card donation or whatever. And there is this challenge of, as you say, like, well, if we write this letter, we know that the seniors are going to give. We can predictably understand that they're going to give money, and we don't know if we spend the same amount of time in our work week trying to try something new digitally. We don't know what the result will be.
That's right.
But you're saying if you don't try, you're gonna die.
Yeah. Exactly. I think you have to support your current supporters well, and those are for most charities in Canada, they're older, and so they're still writing checks. It's funny to say they're still on Facebook. Even Facebook is becoming irrelevant in a lot of ways. So you still need to support them, but you need to build for the supporter of the future, which is not on Facebook, which is not writing checks. Those people are in different spaces and want to be more engaged, want a 2-way conversation. The trust is built in a different way. Once you built trust with some of the older generation, you got it and you had it. And as long as you put out your annual report and you respond and let them know the impact annually of their giving, they'll keep giving. Where the younger generation, and certainly the next generation following, want more constant interaction. They want to partner, like truly partner. And so that means 2-way. That means engaging with them in new and exciting ways, allowing them in co-creating products. Like, who would have thought of that 10 years ago? Wow. All of those elements So I think you need to support those you have now, but understand you're building for a different supporter base in 5 to 10 years. And if we don't start now, again, we're going to be irrelevant relatively quickly.
Right, right. Well, and of course, not just irrelevance of an organization. It's the idea that the heart behind these organizations,
Yeah,
all of the work that we're doing is because it's about real people and real need in the world. Whether
exactly.
that's spiritual, physical, emotional, that the need is huge, and so. It's not about the name of the founder of the organization and making sure they live on forever. It's
Right.
really about the work of the charity, the work of the church in the world. And
Exactly.
so the change matters not for our names, not for the name of some brand. It's because of the people that we're serving.
100%. 100%.
Mike, any last word, to encourage people who are listening? Most people listening, not all, are working in communications, digital, creative within this charity space. How would you encourage them today in this whirlwind of a year as it comes to an end?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, you got to keep on keeping on, and recognize this is a season that we're going through. But in spite of the challenges, there's so much opportunity, and get connected, connect to each other. Something like a LinkedIn or some other. I think LinkedIn's maybe one of the better ones, and really engage and start educating yourselves and be in conversation. Ask lots of good questions of people. If you're a smaller charity, reach out to some larger charities, and ask for some support and help. Allison, who is our CEO and president, has always encouraged us. If we can come alongside and support some of these smaller domestic charities or global charities, just with ideas and conversation, why wouldn't we? That's part of the gift that we can give in doing our ministry. So that would be my strong encouragement: is get connected and learn somehow to take some more risks than you're taking today.
Awesome. Mike, I feel challenged and inspired by what you're saying. I love that you're a risk taker. Again, not reckless, but risk taking for the sake of important work that you're doing.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see what happens. I mean, what we're talking about and in this conversation is in some ways even just related to this podcast, Word Made Digital, because for a number of seasons now, Compassion has been a partner with me, and it's been really amazing to get closer to the work and to see what's going on and to meet a lot of the team that you work with, and just great people. They're just
Yeah.
such good
Yeah.
people over there at Compassion, and to be closer to the need myself, and to have the privilege of sharing that with people here. But as you say, it's not a hard, I don't know, pitch is not even the word you probably use, but it's not a hard sell. It's getting people familiar with who you are as an organization, so that when the time comes, they might have
Yeah.
trust for you. And my hope
That's
too
right.
on this podcast is to help people build trust with and relationship with Compassion over the longer term. And I'm just grateful. I'm grateful to be part of it. It's meaningful, exciting, important work. So thanks so much, Mike, and just your whole team. I'm learning from your team, and just can't wait to see what you do in 2021. All the you
Yeah,
do all
we're
the tests, and I'll just learn from them.
fair enough. That's fair. Hey, we're super excited to be partnering with you too, and love what you're doing, and come alongside any way that we can. Yeah, some neat things are happening. Some neat things are
Yeah,
happening in this space in Canada, and it's exciting to be part of it. So we appreciate you as well.
awesome. Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.